I am Matthew Aaron Mournian. At this stage on Earth, I am currently serving a mission as a professional psychic reader and intuitive healer, specializing in the release and removal of really anything from implantation to entity attachment, all the way down to understanding, where certain memories will exist within the body, layers of data that exist within the body, and honestly, at this stage of the game, really anything that involves interacting with what we might call non-physical energies, the spirit realm, and probably a host of other really strange things as well. And so, yeah. I'd say the most important part of that, and maybe this will just be a add-on that you may or may not put in there, but I think the most important thing that we can do at this stage of the journey, whether you're awakening into understanding, say like the people that watch your channel that are awakening to understanding, that maybe they've been a part of some sort of a program, or maybe other people that are starting to use what we call their intuitive gifts. What I've noticed over the past, I guess we could say 5-6 years, is that I guess we could say one of my primary missions is helping to activate that within people. And so, yeah, very much intuitive training and all of those things. I think for me, the origin of what I would call just the bizarre internal world began probably when I was a child. My maternal grandfather worked at Los Alamos, and he was part of a project that it didn't really have anything to do with super top secret technology. It wasn't supposedly, it didn't really have anything to do with, what we might call, extraterrestrial tech. He was actually working with some sort of a adhesive that they were using. But during that stage of his life, which I believe was in the early 1970s prior to me being born, there was a lot of what we might call abductions. So I came from a family that had been linked to the kind of New Mexico in military industrial complex, but from a much lower level, kind of like a lower level employee. And so it was something that I was aware of. I was aware of it as a child, and I think as I hit kind of adulthood, I was one of those individuals that had, you name the type of abuse, you name the type of addiction, it had happened in my life. And I think for me, I had this crazy awakening journey in 2015 when I began to understand what are essentially the chakras. And so my awakening journey, how I understood that my mission to, help, whether it be train or awaken or heal, what it was, had to have happened through some form of what I call a walk-in or a soul unbraiding. And so for me, most of that really started in 2015, like the real turning point in that. And that began a stage where there was literal beings coming into my room. I would awake in the middle of the night, being able to see and feel. And it sounds crazy, but I could literally taste and hear the channels in my body. And, for me at that time, I thought it was quite literally, I thought I was going insane. I thought I was losing my mind. And yeah, it was a multi-year journey till about 2017 when everything switched and I started doing this work. And I think the initial experience came with a crown chakra opening that I think for those of us that have experienced what we call the Kundalini awakening process, it's like blowing open every door on the body. And so for me, it was not a thing that I could control. But what I noticed within about, I would say like the first 3 days after the initial event happened, and some people have heard me tell this story. I'll tell it very, 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 very quickly. Prior to doing the work that I do now, I was working in a professional capacity as a mental health worker, working with veterans and homeless veterans in San Diego, California. And I had an experience where I was at, like a homeless fair, and someone did a little bit of energy work on me, and it changed my entire life. Within 3 days of that, I awoke laying on the couch in my home, and there was 3 hooded figures to my left. There was a short one on the left, a taller one in the center, and somewhat of a medium-sized one on the right. And I believe that they are what we would call aspects of self. Some people will call them watchers. Some people will call them guides. I think that, as I'm sure you know, there's a vast network of what we might call fourth density non-physical intelligences that I think are just very much a part of our human physical lives. It's just we don't notice them, I think, many times until certain channels are blown open on the body. So I was a really good example of a person that literally got blown open. And I think I lost my mind for about 2 years, walked around talking to animals. I would literally float out of my body. And I mean, it was not a cool thing. I was not a cool version of that. I was a very fearful, pitiful version of it. But it showed me what was possible. And so within that, getting to the beings that you're speaking of, Within that 2-year period, I was greeted by everything from a series of strange light beings that would enter my room. I would pass through portals in the ceiling of my home. I could smell the portal as I was going through it. For those who don't know, it smelled very much like the smell right before rain kicks off, but with a little bit of, I would say, like an additive. Like there's just an atmospheric quality to it. And I think it kind of culminated with a couple mantis beings that had shown up in my life at that stage. And for people that had seen other work that I've done, I had talked about it in great detail, but I think one of the things that occurs for those of us that are going through the process of opening up genetic memory, that are opening up layers of experiences, in some cases, past life, concurrent life, other timelines, it'll often happen with us kind of meeting certain guides or beings. And so for me, it was, I think, as part of the DNA activation process, a number of these guys started showing up. But yeah, I was given energetic modalities. I met a reptilian, got to actually physically touch one of them. I wish I could say it was a beautiful experience, but it was actually kind of traumatic in a lot of ways, as a lot of people that have had contact with those beings would say. But yeah, anyway. In summer of 2019, it was a very average day. I was laying on my bed doing a meditation, and at the foot of the bed, within, I don't know, maybe a few moments, I became encased in what was very much like a hexagonal enclosure. When I was able to pull my eyes up out of it, I was able to see that I had been brought into something that was very much like a hive or a network of just very small kind of little openings, in which, in hindsight, looking back on the experience, it was as if my consciousness was taken into like what we would call a holding area. Within that space, there was a very tall, what I would call a sandy brown kind of, there was a very distinct texture on their skin, dinosaur-like, but very dragon-like beings. And it was standing in front of me, physically picked me up, turned my body around, like the way we would examine an animal, how they'll take something out of the ocean and they'll sort of turn it over. He turned me over, twisted my arms around. And I asked, within that moment, what is this? Is this real? What is happening? And he said, well, touch me. Tell me if this is real. And I watched my hand reach out and I just touched it on the side of his face. And within that moment, there was what I would call a transfer that I think a lot of people experience when you will come, in close contact with a non-physical, sentient being. And I was able to view many things about their culture, some things that were very, very triggering. And I believe it was ultimately an aspect of self that exists in the fourth density non-physical space. But strangely enough, I believe that consciousness has come back several times to guide the work that I do in healings, and some of the clearing sessions. They're not all positive, as we know, but I do believe there is a vast network of positive reptilian energies that are oftentimes linked to us more so than groups or factions. And so my first animal communication moment was right after that initial crown chakra opening in 2015. It was a stage where I would literally leave work. I was so out of my mind. I would walk out of the office I was working in and I would literally wander around this area. And there was one day when I actually ended up walking over to this pier in San Diego, California. Some people from San Diego will know it's called Seaport Village. I went over to this place and I was in this state of like mania, literally losing my mind. It's like any person I touched, I could get, it was all kinds of data was coming in. I would walk past a person and I could tell you what they ate for dinner. I could see them in their house putting on their clothes. It was bewildering, not a cool thing to have. And I remember that day specifically, I was standing next to, it sounds dumb, I was standing next to a dumpster and there was a series of seabirds, like kind of pelican looking birds. And I looked at one of them and I was shown instantly, walk down to the end of the walkway to the left and there's a man sitting there with papers on a rock. And I was like, okay. And so I walked to the left and there was literally a man in a park balancing rocks. That rock balancing thing where and there's literally a guy there balancing rocks. And I went up to the guy and he had literal stack of papers. And on those papers said Reiki healing, entity healing, stuff like that. Oddly enough, that was my first energy clearing session from a completely random man that I was notified of by a literal bird standing on top of a dumpster. And so I think from there on, like some of the first beings I had worked with when I started doing energy healing were cats, dogs as well. And I think for those people that are starting to work with non-physical energy, animals represent really, really excellent conduits, receivers, and they will also give you instant feedback on the work that you do. And so I do think for people that are learning to open up telepathy, animal communication, for some people can be more confusing because they don't communicate in the same way that humans do. There's a lot more of an image and a feeling that is sent, and really nothing conversational on any level. But it's been everything from cats to literal cockroaches, like somebody was talking about here recently, all sorts of strange beings. But for people that are learning psychic or non-physical communication, I think they represent a really powerful entry point in kind of learning non-physical cues. And so when it comes to orbs or what I would call physical beings, I believe that those are one of many forms in which a host of non-physical consciousnesses will kind of inhabit. In some cases, we'll see what we might even call technological versions of that. In other cases, it's a fully formed light being. In some cases, it will be some other form of kind of, sentient entities that will kind of take the form of this light. But what I've noticed, especially with the people that come to us for healing and readings, is that each person will perceive those things entirely differently. Now, when it comes to, I guess, what we might call the Fey realms or fairy beings, you'll hear a lot of kind of folklore and kind of mysticism from people as experiencers within the spiritual kind of soul groups. But I'm going to be real. My experience with fairy energy up until this point has been something that is absolutely real. I find it is most often represented within kind of people in this realm, like people that will hold Fey or fairy realm energy. But at the same time, you will encounter those beings. I guess the thing that I was going to say is that from my experience, they have not been overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I'll be honest, the fairy energies that I've encountered have been what I would call trickster beings. I wish I could say I encountered a loving, awesome fairy energy in the work that we've done, but I actually haven't. I wouldn't call them necessarily like a very dangerous being. I wouldn't say they're going to cause massive damage, but they will definitely twist you off your path. I think they get kind of this strange glee. You'll see a number of what we might call lower density astral plane inhabitants actually gain a lot of power and glee and kind of a high off of kind of dissuading or, screwing up human consciousness and kind of pulling us off into weird avenues. So I guess for me, it hasn't been entirely positive, but we've known a lot of people in our kind of soul group that carry a lot of that energy. And I think it comes in all forms. And even saying that, I feel like I'm not answering that question, but yeah, they're definitely out there. So on the subject of Kundalini activation, we hear a lot of people within our spiritual community talk about the ins and outs of it. Everyone seems to have had at some stage some form of a deeply activated energetic experience within the body in which, sensations and consciousness and internal experiences change. It's very real. And I think also potentially quite dangerous for people who are not, I guess we could say, ready for it on some level. But to kind of define what are people talking about when we talk about Kundalini energy? We're talking about vital life force energy, what some people call chi, what some people call prana. But there is a little bit of a difference you'll find for those that work directly with that energy. And many of us regard Kundalini as prana or chi in motion. So prana or chi will exist within the body as its own primal essence, but when it begins to actively flow up the spinal column and through what we call the nadis, that's often when people begin to describe it as Kundalini. So Kundalini is essentially chi energy in motion, in the process of movement. For me, that process began, like I said, in 2015, and it culminated with, this is always a crazy story. Everyone in the spiritual group has, a wild, insane story. But for me, the process of Kundalini activation kind of cultivated and peaked, I would say several months after the initial crown chakra opening. And this is always this is a fun story for people that love to debunk people like myself. But there was one morning where I was standing in my shower. Literally, I was getting ready for work. I was just taking a shower. So obviously you're covered in water, right? And you're sitting in the shower. And I remember getting this crazy feeling within my body. It's like some kind of wind was literally going through my veins, which sounds crazy. And I was standing in the shower and, doing this autistic glitch out thing. I don't know why I was doing it, but I felt this crazy energy and I was doing this. And I felt and noticed a blue flame appeared in the palm of my left hand. I could practically smell it. I could feel it. The craziest thing is, for people that will hear this, you're like, really? So you're telling me you're standing in water pouring all over your body and somehow this blue flame erupted from your hand? It literally did. And within that moment, it began again. It was like I could push my breath and I could feel something bloom. And the crazy thing about it is, which is always a kicker for people that hear this, they're like, what? And then I actually got scared. I got scared of it and I felt instantly ashamed, and that flame went away and it never came back. And so the reason why I talk about that is because what you will find is, number one, Kundalini energy is very responsive to thought forms, very responsive to emotions, very responsive to, the beliefs that you have. And at the same time, it is something that, unless kind of thoughtfully used or kind of cultivated within the body, can create crazy reactions. And so, at the risk of going on and on, I think it is the number one energy source through which we interact with people when doing energy clearings. And the work that I do, the manner through which we clear blockages, implantation, entity attachments, open up organs, chakras is, and for some people this is a cringe thing, but it is never through calling in archangels. It is never through calling in groups of ETs. It is never through calling in ascended masters. It is through the process of transferring and transmitting vital life force energy in the body. I do believe it is the most powerful energy source that humans can take advantage of, because it's not only something that comes from us, it's something that comes from outside of us. It's something that at the same time holds the data of all of your lineages, every being that you have ever incarnated as. The information and knowledge can be transmitted into your body through the Kundalini activation process. And anyway, it goes on and on and on, and watch out, I'll talk about it forever. But I do believe that anyone can learn to activate that energy. There's a lot of things you can do in the beginning to get it started. There's things that will kind of hold it back, but yeah, anyway, there we go. I was one of those people, like I said, had a previous career in mental health. It's not like I was doing really good, but I was at a stage in the adult life in which, we had purchased a house. I was in a different marriage. I was in what we might call an established identity stage in the human journey. And within that awakening process, like ultimately for me, kind of ended with walking away from every single thing I owned, the career I had, the house that I owned, the possessions, the marriage that I had. I got in my car and drove. It wasn't that far. I drove about 2.5 hours north to Los Angeles. And I was very blessed to come into contact with a group of people and a couple really, really powerful teachers that didn't really give me any knowledge. It's not like they taught me this is this and that's that, but it was like they sort of mirrored to me the ways in which professional intuitives or energy workers would operate. And it gave me an example of something. And so, yeah, the process of viewing auras, first off, is something that everyone can do, very much like remote viewing. We're in a stage on Earth, and this is an important thing for people that may find this in the future to know. You are absolutely living in a stage on Earth in which each individual ensouled, I say this very carefully, I've said it a lot, not all humans have souls, but for those of us that do have souls, you are living in a stage on Earth in which you absolutely have a very distinct set, and there's often many of them, psychic or intuitive abilities. And so when we look at auras, I think that's one of probably the easiest things to organically train yourself to do. And there's a number of techniques. You'll hear people kind of squint their eyes and avert their gaze or look over people's shoulders. But what are we essentially doing when we're viewing the aura is we are viewing what the author Carlos Castaneda talks about, the luminous egg, the bubble that surrounds the human body. Other researchers talk about it as a torus field. Which it is essentially, but it's essentially the living kind of bubble of energy that's around us, and it will take many forms. It'll take many colors. It'll take there's a vast amount of information that we can gather from it. I can say, as a professional that does this work, I don't necessarily place a lot of importance upon what I perceive in people's aura. I'm more focused on what's going on within the chakras, within the meridians, within the layers of the organs, but you will find that, at least these days, what I have seen with people is there's a lot of what we might call sentient technology or non-sentient technology that can be placed within people's auras. I'll have people come in for clearings and they'll say, hey, I have this implant, or there's this device that's spinning in my back. That's a very common one. People will experience kind of a spinning sensation within the body. And in many cases, those are not things that are basically placed within the energy body. They are placed within the auric field. And so this is actually a good data point for people that are learning to clear energy or for people that are kind of learning about, what are implants? What is an entity attachment? What is an actual, what we might call a astral parasite? They will often be placed within the auric field, yet at the same time within the meridians and within the chakras. So I would say I use auric field examination as more of one of many steps in diagnosing what's going on with someone, more so than something that I would be interacting with. Meaning, I would never do a clearing session based entirely upon what we perceive in the auric field, because that's essentially just the outer layer of a person's energy field. And what's wild is even within the auric field, there's what we might call multiple different layers. And, there's lots of researchers and spiritual people have given them names. It doesn't really matter what the name is. What matters is that it is a multi-layered energetic bubble that surrounds the body. And anyway, incredibly powerful, very, very real. And yeah, so people most often come to me for healing anything from trauma within the body to what they will perceive as entities, implantation. We've worked with cancer patients. Most recently, somebody that had a very advanced form of melanoma. We've worked with people with all sorts of endocrine disorders, are very, very well treated with the energy body. But I would say at this stage, it's been a little bit of everything. For me, the most notable kind of effects that we've encountered in clearings often comes from people that have experienced long-running stages of trauma. And also a lot of people that were involved in programs that are trying to understand like what is true, what is not true, what's going on with this part of my body, what's going on with this, illness that I'm having. So I would say these days we've been treating much more what we call emotional trauma release stuff. And who do I mean when I say we? It's probably a good thing to talk about. I work with what I call a group of, we could call them guides, we could call them beings. I think some of them are kind of native to me. I've identified a mantis being that has been with us in many different sessions. There's what I call, this is always kind of cringe yet kind of funny and also literally true. There is what I call a network of doctors that exists within the astral realm. And these are people that have existed throughout history. These are also just collections of like data and knowledge that has been gathered by humans and many beings over time. I think that they will exist in somewhat of a council format. And so what I've identified in a lot of the clearings I do is in each and every person has this. We have access points within our energy field. So what I learned very early on was when I would connect to the left side of my field, there was an entire conversation that would come in, and I would connect to the left, kind of like look upward to the left, and I would hear data about, what's going on in, your liver or your spleen. And so, I believe that in some cases, those are the guides that people work with, which is one of the things that I do specialize in. People will come in trying to understand where they are on their timeline. They're trying to understand, where am I going? What am I doing? I'm experiencing strange memories. I will have these dreams in which I'm being taken to these places and go through, series of experiences. How do I discern if that is true or not? So I would say at this stage of the game, most of what I do is kind of understanding and unpacking and treating those things in a therapeutic manner rather than treating physical illnesses. Although it does happen at the same time. So pyrokinesis came in for me. I believe this was late 2015 when the awakening journey started. And like I said, I was standing in the shower one morning, literally getting ready to work, and I started moving my hands like this, and a literal blue flame came out of the palm of my hand. And honestly, I wish I could say that it was cool. I wish that I could say I felt victorious, like some kind of a superhero or an X-Men. But honestly, I felt afraid, and I felt triggered by it, and I felt ashamed. And as I felt the second kind of wave of flame coming out of my palm, it was like something inside me turned off and kind of blocked that. I would say since then, if you wanted to put a label on, I guess, what we would call the primary psychic or intuitive tools I use a lot of internal body remote viewing. I think, honestly, it's probably one of the most well-polished and honestly easily teachable skills that I have, that a lot of other people in our community use. And that is the natural God-given ability to view what's going on inside of a person's body, which is where I think I come in as a remote viewer, much more so than world events. And so oftentimes what we do in a session is all I need to do is hear about maybe a few seconds of your voice, and usually look at the corners of the outside of your eyes and maybe a few other elements of body language, but that will tell me literally everything you need to know about what's blocked within a person, chakras, meridians that might be blocked up. You can even tell if people are kind of holding data in their kind of crown chakra field, which is a good thing for people to know, for people that are trying to unlock memories, which is a big thing people come to me for. They're like, I think I was in this, I think I was in that, I'm having these experiences. How do I get more of it? How do I understand what it was? How do I know if it was even real? And what we find is that for a lot of people right now, especially those that are going through like big waves of, multidimensional activation, is that it's very much like on your hard drive, like on your laptop or your phone, and you'll get this message that's like, do you want to download, version, whatever of this software? And it's like things will hold within our energy field. And so I've noticed that I tend to be brought in when people have a download or a corner turn or some 180 or a 90-degree turn in their life. And it'll usually have to do with understanding or decoding some kind of multidimensional events in their life. And I'll just say one other thing to add to that. The overall effect when we do these clearings, when we kind of work with people's energy over and over and over again, the overall effect in the end actually causes people to become more intuitive, more psychically aware. And for those that will eventually see this, just by learning to work with your chakras and meridians, if people are looking for an actual method, how do I actually activate the psychic abilities that I believe that I have? It is through the purging, the healing, the draining, the activation of the non-physical channels in the body. And so yeah, that's primarily what we do. Do I have any involvement in clandestine or secret programs? Number one, no. I do not have any knowledge of being used in anything like that in this life. However, I have had the experience of, multiple people from those things saying they recognize me from this or that. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have absolutely no recollection of that on my timeline. However, I will tell you this, my introduction into that realm came through, one of the more notable SSP, whistleblowers who now denies his experiences. Everyone's going to know who that is. My introduction into that came through me listening to this person on Coast to Coast AM, I think in 2016. And the thing that blew my mind about this individual was that he was describing a dream that I had when I want to say between 8 and 10 years old. One of those dreams, and I know everyone, all of us as we go through this human journey, there's certain dreams that you have that stay with you for your entire life. The thing that drew me into that was that this person was describing a dream that I had. And so it kind of brought me into the understanding of, those things being real. But I have found that, my relevancy comes in with people who are trying to understand their roles or what happened to them or how to unlock that genetic data within the body. So I would say I'm much more of a person who serves in a support role in trying to help decode and understand and heal that experience, but I do not claim to be an experiencer of that. I am, however, a person that's been in contact with what I like to call a host of extraterrestrial energies, I believe pre-birth, pre-life. I mean, it's been my entire life. And I think with that, I do have a number of memories of what I would call military abductions, not being within the ship that they use, but being dropped off on the back porch of my house and watching this craft go up. And then it's like this light bubble would form around it. So it would go up and then it would like pop and then it would kind of trail off. And I'd watch them come in as well. And it would be like this light that would come down over my backyard and then the light would pop and then there would be like a cylinder or I would like to say it was a craft, but the kicker for me comes in because I have no knowledge of what happened after that. And I think that's kind of the thing for a lot of us in this, community. Some people have excellent recall of certain things. I have not been a person that felt a great emphasis to need to pull that data out. For me, it's been more about understanding what's been going on with the groups of extraterrestrial, or what I call extraterrestrial guides that I've been working with, which coincidentally gave me an entire modality of energy healing, which we use to this very day. While we have not worked on missing person cases, I have been asked to identify certain missing objects. I did have a guy that hired me a couple of years ago to locate a treasure that was in a riverbed, and I'm going to be real. I do not believe the treasure was in that riverbed. They had a location of it. They had, I think they had coordinates, you know. It was not an official remote viewing assignment. It was that he was asking me to somehow point him to it or give him some data about it. And through that experience, I discerned, at least through my understanding, that it was not there. There was no remnant of it there. And to be honest with you, the man that was looking for it didn't find it. So technically, it was true. There had been another case where I had been called in. This is when I worked at a physical shop to find a lost object. I won't say what the object was. It was very, very valuable. Honestly, in that case, we could tell instantly that it had been sold for drugs. Like instantly, as soon as a person came in, it was like, oh, it's gone. He sold it for drugs. It was like an instant thing. So in identifying those things, I think that that's actually a good thing to talk about, because I think that that's where people like me would move outside of the realm of traditional remote viewing. One of the things I've learned about the intuitive work that I do is that I was never trained. I did not have, nobody from the CIA came in and said, hey, I want to teach you remote viewing. You know what I mean? I was never like that. I was a person that had an organic awakening, like every channel in my body got blown open. And through that experience, I learned that I could do certain things. There's a host of many beings that came in, but I think that I've been blessed to be one of those people that has been able to prove to myself that I could do anything at least one time. And so I think it's been cool, because since I entered that stage of my life, it has completely taken over everything I do. And it is the sole source it is the number one and only way in which I support myself. And so I would say I practice remote viewing these days much more through the lens of understanding what's blocked within a person's body. I would like to call it internal remote viewing, more so than looking at outer events. But yeah, that's literally all we do at this stage. And so people oftentimes will, like I said, they'll come to me to understand the nature of their experience, what's wrong within the body. They'll be plagued by a certain, entity or a being, or in some cases a demon. Not too long ago, I had a woman that she was uncovering memories of being involved in what she did not know at the time was satanic ritual abuse, through the work that she did after. And this is a crazy story. She had a surgery. I'm trying to remember the type of surgery, but it was a proctology surgery, which essentially within that surgical procedure, a number of memories had been unlocked within her body, of her being in cages, of her being taken to certain places and being used in rituals. And through some of the work that we did within those sessions, she was able to go back and confront her family members and people that were around at that time. And it actually opened up an entire, honestly, this is not always a good thing, but it opened up a massive can of worms in this person's life, and actually led to the exposure of her entire family being involved in this. I can even tell you the name of the cult that it was, although probably shouldn't say that one online, but. So on the subject of astral parasites, what are they? How do they work? Well, what I have observed through my own experience of being subjected to these things at an earlier stage of my life, and also through the work that I do on a daily basis, is that for most of us, astral parasites are not going to be what we would call a sentient being. It's not a sentient entity. It's not something that's going to talk to you or has a presence. Most of us encounter them like we would encounter fleas or ticks or physical parasitic beings in our physical world. And so when we talk about astral parasites, through my experience and what I've observed, they're most often used to influence individuals to create an electrochemical reaction in the body that will continue to lead us to, negative ego behaviors. It can be anything from sex to addictions, drugs and alcohol, all sorts of behaviors, even just simple self-sabotage. And so what we notice when people have astral parasites is it is almost never a presence that talks to you. It does not create a voice in your head. What it is something that's influencing your mind and your heart, and it will cause you to act and behave in certain ways. And as we know, it also contributes greatly to physical health. Certain psychological disorders, schizoaffective disorders can be brought on by specific astral parasites that will be placed around the crown, which is a literal reality for people out there that have a cyclical kind of schizoaffective thing. That's many people in our community, but that is something that can be incredibly well treated by opening the crown or balancing the crown chakra. And so back to the subject of astral parasites, I will most often observe them within the meridian body, which I think is a good thing for people that are learning energy clearing. And creating their own energetic healing modalities. When it comes to parasitic interaction, most often we'll find those within the meridians. We will find in many cases what we would call a sentient being, or in some cases not even like a sentient being, it's more like a sentient recording, which is a very strange idea that those will exist in a form that can be attached to the human body, but they absolutely will. And so in most cases, we will find those within the chakras, more so than the meridians. You'll find that the meridian body is going to be much more immediate. And if you want to influence a person's thoughts or behaviors in the now moment, you'll work with the meridian body more than the chakra body. If you want to change a person's timeline, if you want to, bring people back into long running stages of trauma, or if you even want to bring up altars that exist within the body, or have someone switch unwillingly into a negative altar, that often will happen through manipulation of the chakras rather than the meridian system. And depending on what type of feelings, depending on what type of urges, depending on what type of thought forms, the specific imagery that comes in with them, that will actually tell you where to treat. And so I would say when it comes to astral parasites, probably number one most common destination that I will find them within the body is within the gallbladder meridian. Which for those that don't know begins right here at the corner of your eye and does this crazy squiggly line all the way down to your fourth toe. But that's going to be not one of the number one places, primarily because the gallbladder channel in the body is responsible for that running loop of thought forms, like the stories that you still have in your head, or the experiences that continue to echo through your mind's eye, say when you're standing in the shower, when you're laying in bed. That's usually when the gallbladder will kick in, and it'll just run these tapes playing in your body. Some are positive, some are negative, but that's usually one of the number one places where those energies will interact. And anyway, the list goes on and on and on. Really, depending on what the person is experiencing, if you understand the channels within the body, or what I call the psychosocial qualities of chakras and meridians, that will give you all the data you need to know on where it is that you need to address. It doesn't always tell you what it is you need to do to release that energy from the body, but they give you a roadmap. And so, anyway, it's a deeply fascinating thing that I will rant on forever. So watch out. I do believe that most mental illness can be treated by balancing the energy body. In most cases, it kind of depends upon what the symptomology is. We've worked with a number of people over the years that have dealt with anything from bipolar disorder to schizophrenia to extreme dissociative disorders. I did have a lady come in for a session a couple of years ago that had a handler, and the handler was with them through the entire session, and it was just something where you could tell there was a layer of restriction that had been placed over that. But why do I think I have these abilities? I would say first off, everyone does. I think that if you're incarnated on Earth right now, if you have a soul, there is a very distinct set of abilities that in many cases you chose prior to incarnating. I know that was very much the case for myself. I do believe that at this stage, most of us that come to an understanding of some, fledgling nature of multidimensionality, I think it's very fair that you could refer to those people as starseeds. But I also got to be real. I think I have a lot of Aquarian energy, and I cringe anytime anyone labels anyone as a starseed now. I feel like it's sort of becoming this super diluted term, kind of like light worker. I would say a similar one would be the flower children from the 1960s and 70s. It's essentially just a spiritual label that I think people will add on to that, to try, for a number of reasons. But, yeah, people will come in and ask me about star origins. And I think when I started this journey, I went to a number of people, saying, where am I from? Oftentimes the question of, am I a starseed is a really, really big one that will come in. And, I have actually a question about that question. And that is for people that will see this, how come we in this spiritual community only identify ourselves as being from 1 or 5 different star systems, right? If you're in the starseed community, you're either going to be Pleiadian, Arcturian, Sirian, what's another one? Another label. Or you will be a reptilian. And so if we are existing in a realm with countless forms of life, how come we on Earth only choose to identify ourselves through 5 or 6 identifiers? One of the most cringe ones, and I'm sorry to say this publicly, but one of the most cringe ones is, I am an Andromedan contactee. I'm just going to be real, because you don't have to be in any program to look at Andromeda and go, okay, where? We're talking about trillions of worlds. Which one are we talking about? You're an Andromedan contactee? Awesome. Can you tell me anything more? And then you see people come in and they're like, well, I'm a Pleiadian. And I'm like, okay, cool. So as far as I can tell, there are almost 2,000 habitable worlds within the Pleiades. Which one? Which one are you from? What group? Another one that comes in, people say, I'm a reptilian. Okay, cool. Correct. All right, cool. So at the same time, there are billions upon trillions of forms of these consciousnesses. And so for me, I think I have come to the stage where I have ceased making any attempt to identify star origins through the pre-existing terminology that we use within our soul group. And honestly, I encourage people to stop doing that. Stop trying to fit yourself into a Syrian identity. Stop trying to fit yourself into, some Arcturian story. Because as far as I can tell, these are, and for those of you that have had experiences with those beings and been on other worlds, none of them identify themselves as that. When it comes to past life incarnations, I do know that I've spent a lot of time in what we might call the Orion system. I think that I'm a very, very good example. If you do want to put starseed labels on people, I'm a really good example of what we call Orion energy. I know that I've spent many incarnations in, an often dreaded term. Everybody gets weird when you talk about it. The Orion group, and also a very real faction that still exists to this day in many different forms. It's not called Black League anymore, but that is a legitimate faction of many different Black League incarnates on Earth at this time, of which I am one of them. However, I don't necessarily identify myself as that. I don't wear it as a badge, that I would like take into certain, it's never a thing that I'm going to go on YouTube and claim like I'm from the Orion group. But honestly, I would say if there is a soul origin point for me, it's definitely Orion. And honestly, I've nailed it down to Mintaka as being one of the most often occurring places that I will return to. And there's a number of us in this soul group that will return to that realm. And it's funny because we spend a lot of time on Earth in the human life cycle talking about how it's so negative and how it's so evil and how, all the Draco are out there. And they are. But it's very much like New York, best of the best and worst of the worst, all together at the same time. And when it comes to past lives, though, what I've noticed, I've had many, many different incarnations. One of the most recent ones was in the Templar orders, of which there were many different kinds throughout history. I think that we often hear about one of the most popular ones through the lens of, the bloodlines and the preservation of that. But there were many different orders of Templars that existed throughout history. And so that's been a role that I've taken many times. Lots of incarnations as doctors, many different boring human incarnations, but a number of really interesting ones in what we would call World War II or war eras. I have a really big Russian arc, what I would call it, a Russian kind of villain arc, where I think I had a number of incarnations in Russian mafias and criminal groups, all the way down to the extent where in this life, prior to having any kind of awakening experiences, I actually went and got unknowingly a series of Russian prison tattoos, not even knowing that's what that was at that stage. And so they just kind of showed up. They'll just kind of show up on your timeline. But anyway, yeah, all kinds of stuff. I will treat pretty much everything we do within the energy body very much like a surgeon, very much like a doctor. There is no emotional investment in the process of clearing a person's energy, yet at the same time, there is. And it's very much a force that you will call up to assist you in that. But I think, in fact, honestly, the best work that I've done has been completely emotionally and mentally, removed from it, which is probably a thing that I should mention. For those of us that do what we might call professional healing work, get ready. I'm going to shoot us all in the foot. Everybody that does this all at the same time. It's not a thing that you actually do. We become vessels on some level. For those that follow the law of one, they talk about very specifically that the healer does not heal anyone. It's an opportunity for healing. It's like a transaction that takes place whenever, two or more are gathered. And so I would like to think of us much more as like a multi-dimensional door opener. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll just open the door. But really the action is really theirs and theirs to take, and it's something that occurs between that person and their higher self. But it can take any form. It can, honestly change people's lives in many cases. Since starting on July 17th of 2017, I have recorded, I believe, just over 4,000 private sessions. I like to bring it up to 5,000 because I think maybe with the people that we've met at conferences and stuff over the years, maybe we could stretch it to that. But honestly, I'm not a person that gains, joy out of quantifying how many sessions I've done, because honestly, you can do, I'll tell you, I think when I stopped counting, we were at 4,100, but just because you did something 4,000 times does not mean that you did it right. It doesn't mean you did it well. It doesn't mean that you did it on an effective level. And so, it's a very individual process. But yeah, at this stage, we've worked with people on nearly every continent, probably except for, I don't know. I don't think we've worked with anyone from China yet. I don't think I've worked with anyone in Russia directly, but pretty much every other, all the other main places in the world. For some people, the feedback that we get after sessions is incredible. And it will be, anything from, I was finally able to overcome an addiction in my life, to, I am finally making steps to, go to this place or begin this job, or I'm now understanding. And honestly, this is the most common one, which for some people is a cringe thing because not everyone's at this stage yet. But people will come in and we will do an energy clearing session, and it will literally unlock an ability within your body. It will unlock your own ability to do the very same thing that I do in that moment. And there's some people that can come into a session and receive that energy and begin doing that work instantly. In fact, the energetic modality that I use is one that allows a person with literally no experience or training whatsoever to use a series of vocal commands that, even if you have no knowledge of what they do, using that vocal command and using that phrase will actually cause chakras, the energy around our organs, and the meridians to begin to dilate and open. And so I would say the most common thing that people will experience is that they will start doing a certain type of work, or they will have their own form of intuitive activation. But on the other side of that, people will come in and they will feel more grounded. They will feel more together. They will be, treating certain waves of trauma. We've had, number of things. It gets really weird and also amazing. And then again, at the same time, which is a thing that you got to be real about. I think when you see so many thousands of people over the years, you're going to have people that have this incredible experience. Then you're going to have other people that will come in and they'll go, oh, that was very nice. Yeah, thank you. I feel very grounded. And so results will definitely vary based upon the individual's kind of openness, their willingness to receive energy, the physical kind of buildup within the body. People will come in very, very blocked up with, toxic stuff. Any antidepressant medications, any form of mood stabilizers, SSRIs, MAOIs will actually kind of hold back some of the energy clearing process, and they will also hold back your intuitive abilities. And so, anyway, I'm just kind of ranting on that question now, but do I think magic is real? Absolutely. But I think it depends on what each individual defines as magic. Because, what they say with any technology advanced enough to the untrained eye will appear as magic. So I think it kind of depends on what we're asking about. But yes, absolutely, magic is real. What I'm foreseeing within the next few years for, what we might call society, our soul group, those that are kind of cognizantly going through what we would call the awakening journey, I think that everything that happens on Earth at this stage is something that we signed up for. And I believe that we, as a co-creative collective source existing on Earth, we're constantly changing and altering the timeline. And I think one of the things that I've observed as a person who, I guess you could call it, looks at time on a regular basis, which is kind of a crazy statement, but as soon as you really start leaving the physical body, you realize that time is nothing like it transpires here on Earth. And a lot of people believe time itself to be a sentient living frequency that we interact with. And so what I see coming, within the next few years is something that we are all deciding on right now. I think as we've seen, with things like, World Economic Foundation, the Great Reset, the ongoing strangulation of freedom on planet Earth, in my opinion, and I know people don't want to hear this, I think it's going to continue. It's going to keep happening. In fact, it's probably for, a number of years, we're going to experience the slow stranglehold of, control over the populace. And I think that is by design. I think that that humanity, or at least what I've observed, and I know many other people have observed, that it's like we do our best work when highly pressurized. And we're at the stage on Earth right now where the control structures and the powers that be are they're pressurizing everyone. And so I would like to say, within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see, a number of, greater political uprisings, all kinds of unrest. Most of it will be manufactured, the problem, reaction, solution scenario. I think that's going to continue on Earth for quite some time. And, a lot of people don't like, people like me saying that because, they want to believe that, we're going to go into the new Earth, or the solar flash is going to happen, or, some sort of a great diversion is going to take place, or, maybe Thorhan's going to come down, with the Federation and everything is going to change. And I think one of the important things to mention is that while that is a possibility, we are living on a time on Earth where each and every reality is entirely viable. What I've noticed, and I think a lot of people that kind of, watch the collective movements from an intuitive perspective have noticed, is that we are still deciding. So when people say, I perceive this coming in the future, I think those are very distinct possibilities and they are absolutely possible. But the future, I think on Earth at this stage is still, and this is a dangerous thing to say, mostly unwritten. I think that we're creating it and destroying it and reforming it constantly. Does that mean that we will go in a different direction than we did at, the fall of Atlantis, which many people have observed, that we are coming to a similar stage, that we were at that, epoch? Does it mean that we're going to go the same route as we did at that time? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I think for people that are looking for somewhat of a greater collective roadmap of where we might be going, I would say, look at your understandings of what happened, in those previous epochs. I think Tartaria is a really hidden and good example of a form of a technological society that we could be moving toward on a slightly smaller level, meaning that, for those that have observed what we call that kind of the epoch or the timeline of Tartaria, there was an incredibly rapid and explosive advancement in forms of technology that were far more advanced than what we have on Earth today, but far less mechanical, far less what we would call digital, much more elemental. And so, what I would like to see is us moving toward, that type of a frequency, that type of a society. I think that's a very distinct possibility. I think that's one of the reasons why the timelines of Tartaria, or our understanding of that very short epoch, I do believe it was a short epoch, I believe one of the reasons why that is still suppressed is because we have the potential to reach that again very, very quickly. And so I would like to say it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, but this is what we signed up for. And if you are living on Earth at this time and, you're one of the people that's going, I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to come here. What, come down to Earth, they said, that whole game. Everyone chose this. And maybe I'm wrong because, each individual soul gets to, we all have our own path. But in the work that I do on a daily basis, every single person chooses to come in here. We don't choose everything that happens, but when we trace it back to the real soul origin points, we find that people's souls and their energy were grateful to come here. Many of us incarnated thousands of lives on different worlds prior to coming into the Earth game. And so anyway, not to go on and on, but I think no matter what happens on Earth at this stage of the game, this is probably the number one place to be. And so anyway, I'll leave it there, but yeah, thank you. I would encourage people to simply daydream and feel into your consciousness and notice where your mind and your heart takes you in that journey. I think that's for a lot of us, that is one of the ways in which it's not necessarily that we're going to be remote viewing certain events, but we're going to be tapping into the version of ourselves and the soul resonances and the data within us much more quicker, I think, or on a much simpler level. It's much more attainable to kind of link in with a version of yourself from another timeline than it is to look at something from a collective perspective. And so anyway, I think I'm over articulating that answer, so I'll stop there.
Yesterday, I got a scoop mark when I was on the beach. Can you tell? Can you see?
Where is the scoop mark?
It's inside my nose. It's right here. It hurts really bad. Well, the pain started going down this morning or this afternoon.
Actually, we can. Sorry to make it weird. Can I just hold your hand for a second? It just helps. Oh,
Yeah.
see, I could already feel it. Okay, good. So just do me a favor. Take a slow breath. Slow breath in. Thanks, James. Good job. Okay, there's a little pain there. Thank you. Good job. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out through your nose.
Oh.
It's okay. It's okay. Do it again, and we're going to breathe out through your nose. Okay. Thank you. Okay, you're good now. Well, it's the thing that happens a lot, right?
Yeah, this one is particularly more painful than the other ones.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to say weird things to you right now. I'm sorry if I make this right. It feels like it's because you have a nerve right here that's making it way more painful. And it looks like there's a one of the follicles inside your nose is kind of swollen from that, it's not a nasal polyp, but it's kind of inflamed. And you're gonna know the truth, so only hold what fits. But
Okay.
But yeah, it feels like a combination of just after effects of whatever was pulled out of you. If I were to put kind of a label on it, it feels like an ongoing monitoring process. And if I were to go even further, and this is the part you really got to check in on, it feels like you're being monitored for DNA changes or some sort of an electrochemical shift within the body. It's common. I think part of it has to do with you coming to Florida. Part of it has to do with people that you talk to over there. Part of it has to do with what looks like a rapid alter shift that they bring you through at times, where they'll shift into different versions of you, and it'll be confusing. There's like there's like a slightly more younger version. You can find me at rememberyourmission.com. Myself and my wife, Anora, our really only purpose at this stage, our actual occupation is as professional intuitives, as professional psychic readers, energy clearing practitioners. It is the only thing I do. And so I would say for people that are seeking a whole different modality, a modality that you can use, a modality that will fundamentally change the ways in which you perceive non-physical energy, it's an excellent opportunity to also begin your path of training. And I think that's primarily one of the things that I've been doing over the past year and a half, is training people to use the very things that I do in sessions, whether that be multidimensional tarot, whether that be how to work with the meridians, whether that be how to work with chakras, whether that be how to clear the energy body, how to tell when you have an entity attachment, how to tell when you have an actual implant within the body, which is one of the biggest kind of spiritual buzzwords. Everything we do is at rememberyourmission.com. And then we also do semi-weekly show on YouTube at Remember Your Mission as well. You can just go on YouTube and go to at Remember Your Mission. But we do kind of a weekly show over there. I call it Live from the Multidimensional Trailer Park. And honestly, it's just a place where a bunch of us weird kind of social outcasts gather and talk about weird psychic things and multidimensionality. So anyway, that's where you'll find this, rememberyourmission.com.
Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.